Oh, all right.
All right, everybody, it is 1:30, September 13th. I'm Andrea Tantillo with the Houston-Galveston Area Council, and we're all here for the Parks and Natural Areas Roundtable. If this isn't the meeting you plan to be in, I hope you'll stay anyway, because we've got a treat today because we've got a couple of great presentations. Before we get started, I want to go over a couple of etiquette tips. As always with any online meeting, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. You can turn your camera off when you're not presenting. During the roundtable, we welcome you to unmute and to turn your camera back on, and there will be Q&A throughout the presentations for you to be able to turn your microphones on and ask questions. If you don't know where the mute and unmute button are and the video and video off button are, they're in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. If you want to chat with us, that's also in the bottom of your screen on your toolbar. The controls are similar on your phone. The mute and unmute on your left, and the chat you can access by clicking the three little buttons on the right and getting more. And so now I will turn the meeting over to the chair of our roundtable, Mr. Glenn Laird.
It means I have to unmute and turn my camera on, I guess. Okay, welcome everybody. Glad you can be participating here today. If you want to know who all's here, there's 43 of us on right now. This is really a good showing. You can just click on the participants button and kind of scroll around and see who all's here. That way we don't have to have 43 people introduce themselves. And we can get on with what we've got to do. But at any rate, I will introduce myself. I'm Glenn Laird. I am the environmental chief at Harris County Flood Control District, and have been working with Parks and Natural Areas now for quite a number of years, even before I began chairing. As was stated, we have a significant bunch of stuff to do today. We're going to begin with our two presentations. First one is going to be by Kristen Weil, who's with the Trust for Public Lands. And I'll turn it over to her now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Andrea, for having me. My name is Kristen Weil. I'm manager of urban analytics for the Trust for Public Land, and I'm also the ParkServe project manager. So today I'm going to give an in-depth presentation about the ParkServe mapping platform. And I'm also going to show a quick presentation about a tool that we created a couple of years ago that's specific to the kind of Harris County, a portion of Harris County. So without further ado, let's just dive in here. Okay. All right. So here we are at the ParkServe landing page, and that is available at tpl.org/ParkServe. You can also just Google ParkServe, and it'll pop up on the top. So ParkServe is at its core, it's a ParkServe data, it's a parks database for 14,000 cities and towns across the US. So for any city, census designated city or town in the US that overlaps with any urban area, so that's a lot, it's about 75% of the US population, we have parks data. And based on that, we have the 10-minute walk around the park and some other information for all of these cities and towns. So chances are, if you live in a city or town, you can utilize this free mapping application to view your city. And my first example, I'm going to cruise over to Sugar Land. Oops, don't look, I pressed a weird button. Okay. To show what we call the city profile page. So again, for all 14,000 cities and towns, we have this these city profile pages that give the number of people within a 10-minute walk of a park. So here in Sugar Land, 55% of residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park. And that is broken down Here we have an infographic, and then we have that broken down by age, income, and race and ethnicity. So you can see how those kind of compare to one another. And then here is the mapping application, which I will get to in a minute. But first, I want to cruise over to Houston. So for the 100 largest cities, we have a program called Park Score, and I'm sure a number of you are familiar with this, but Park Score ranks the 100 largest cities in the country based on their park systems. So when you use the ParkServe mapping application for the 100 largest cities, you get additional information. So Houston, it has your ranking for 2021, and then it has the scores. So this year we added a 5th category based on equity. So all that is here. And then again, just the regular 10-minute walk statistics like every other city or town in ParkServe. But then we also this year added a bunch of more stuff. So it's park space per race and ethnicity and income, etc. So, and also amenities per capita. So there's a ton more information on this page than for the rest of the cities and towns, but although those do have a good amount of information for them also. Okay, without further ado, I'm diving in to the mapping application. So this, the first thing that you see is a tour that pops up. And this is going to actually take you through all the functionality of the tool. I'm your tour guide today, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip it. But I suggest that if you have never been to ParkServe or it's been a while, take the tour and it'll refresh your memory of all the stuff that it can do and some new stuff that we've added recently. Okay, so here we are in Houston. The first thing that you see when you first enter the site is parks in dark green, their 10-minute walk service areas in light green, and then what we call park priority areas for new parks in this light purple to dark purple spectrum. You can zoom in, click on parks, let me move this. So here, this gray bar is dynamic. So as you click on things, it changes. So here it says Houston city level report. Click on this park and it changes. Now you can see the number of people, the 10-minute walk around the West Gray Adaptive Recreation Center, and the race and ethnicity breakdown, age and income of that park. So this is a dynamic bar that changes as you cruise around. The next thing is this park priority areas. And are you guys still seeing the ParkServe map? Is that what everybody's seeing? I got a weird message.
We see a ParkServe map that has Houston in the center.
Good. Okay. All right. Yeah. Something just popped up and I was scared it switched to a different screen. All right. Thank you. So the park priority areas are this light to dark purple spectrum. And this is based on underlying block group information that we have compiled across 7 different metrics. So six different metrics that include population density, the density of low-income households and people of color, a measure of air pollution, a measure of urban heat, and then we have a composite metric for health that is based on mental health and physical activity. So this is just a really comprehensive analysis for all of the ParkServe cities that gets at the multiple benefits of parks. So essentially, this purple spectrum is just showing 4 areas of town where residents currently do not have access to a park within a 10-minute walk of home. And this prioritization is to try to drive decisions to where parks are needed first, based on their multiple benefits to the community. As you can see, Houston has a funky boundary. So we've added this addition to zoom to the urban area. So then now you can see wall to wall for the whole Houston urban area, which is defined by the census. you can see park need wall to wall for all the different communities that make up the metropolitan area. So that will come in handy with, and then you can go just back to the city level. So that's there. Okay. So I'm going to show an example of, or no, actually, let's do this. I also just want to show some of these other tools and data sets that the tool has. We've added park amenities, so you can see where trails are in parks as well as playgrounds. So all that is available in the tool, parks and playgrounds and trails for all 14,000 cities and towns. If you were hip to the release of the Park Score equity analysis, you'll see that those results are in here. So these, the blue and the brown are the highest concentrations of white versus people of color in Houston. And then we also did this analysis looking at park acreage per capita. So you can see where, you know, the park equity stats are being derived from in the community. That's just for the Park Score 100 largest cities. And then for everyone else, we have, okay, all the low income households. We have percent people of color, et cetera, population density. So a ton of metrics there on kind of community demographics. Then we have health. So you can see where there's higher concentrations of mental health, low physical activity, as well as climate and environment. So we have respiratory hazard based on the EPA and urban heat islands, which are land surface temperatures derived from satellite imagery. So that is the suite of data that are available, and most of them you can click on. So here we have the low income, click here. The low income households percentage here is 51.5. And we just added this. You can click on the park priority areas and get a ton of data. So you can see what the values are for those metrics that we use at the block group level. All right. So that is just like kind of the grand tour of all the data in the tool. And now I'm going to go to an example of the functionality that can be used for decision making. So here in Pasadena, we have some pretty high priority park need. And I want to see what I can do to fill in those high need, very high priority park areas. So we added this year schools to the mapping application. So you can turn on the schools and their 10-minute walk. And you can see the school and the 10-minute walk service area around the school. And so you can see that this one and this one both cover, their 10-minute walks will cover a large swath of this very high priority park need residents. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this evaluator. So you can either click here, or you can click on the 3 lines and go to evaluators. And I'm going to hit draw park. And it's going to let me draw in this park. And let's do both schools. Maybe we have a big grant and we can do both schools. We're kind of converting their schoolyard playground area into like a nice, beautiful park with shade and maybe some stormwater infrastructure and play areas. And then we're also after hours opening it up to the community so that it becomes a joint use agreement playground that the community can also benefit from when the kids aren't there. And then we're also creating like a little greenway between the two of them. So now we have 2 parks and a greenway connecting them. And we can hit run analysis, and this will crunch all the numbers and give you this output. So here we have our 2 parks and our greenway, their 10-minute walk service areas around them. And it shows that in Pasadena, we did have 54% of the population within a 10-minute walk, and now we have almost 58% of the population with a 10-minute walk. And then it gives you the breakdown of who lives within a 10-minute walk of those new projects that we just created. So the total population served is anyone at all that lives within a 10-minute walk of those projects. And the new population served is those people that do not currently have access to a park in 10 minutes that now would have access to a park in 10 minutes because we just made those projects happen. And so that's broken down, the new and the total, for race and ethnicity, age and income. And then you can hit export report, and this takes a couple moments, but it will give you a PDF report that you can print out and staple to a grant, a proposal that you can make the case for these projects in these schoolyards. So I'm going to stop there for ParkServe. That's kind of the whole story. This is that printable PDF, and see if there's any questions so far.
So Kristen, I see Marianne has her hand up. We had one question in the chat. It was what kind of parks? Is it surface or trees? It was from Susan Chadwick, who I think might not be here anymore, but that question came early in your presentation. So if that question,
Yeah.
Oh no, she's still here if she wants to unmute and clarify. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry, I thought that that question would be enough, but yeah, I'm curious, do you break down what kind of parks you're talking about? Playgrounds, hard surface, trees, grass? I mean, it's an admirable program, but I was just wondering how you define a park.
Thanks. Yeah, so we have a pretty broad definition of parks at this time. It's just any publicly accessible open space. And we haven't really devised that down into park type. We did add in the trails and the playgrounds, so you can see whether or not parks have one of those two amenities. And we also tend not to include undeveloped open. So if there's like, a conservation area that's fenced off or doesn't really have any trails to speak of, it's just kind of like completely natural, we don't really tend to use those so much. But we do add in any schoolyards that currently do have a joint use agreement. And it's a more broad definition of park that's just any publicly accessible open space.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I did, because the metric of the percentage of people within a 10-minute walk could also, you could have like giant high rise with, thousands of people living around a very small, playground or something. And it seems to me there's some weakness in that kind of, it's great, but, sharing, but you also have the amount of space per capita too. So maybe that balances out that problem of a great many people living around a very small park within
Right.
10 walk.
Yeah, we have the park acres per capita layer that you can turn on. And that is something that we consider, it's something for us to consider moving forward. It's kind of a specific example that doesn't happen too often, but like in general, the 10-minute walk standard is, what we use. And for 14,000 cities and towns, it's a good start.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Marianne. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Thanks, I'm unmuted. I have a question. I know you serve mostly, I guess, cities and towns. What's the minimum size? And I'm sorry if I missed this, the minimum population size you survey? And then secondly, is there any thought to more suburban areas or rural areas so that you can see sort of preserve systems, things that would be accessible to people, but maybe are not in major urban, more developed areas?
Sure. So we do not currently have a population cutoff. Our cutoff is actually a little bit nuanced based on the number of census block groups in the town. So there are very small cities and towns in ParkServe. So chances are it's there. If it's not, it's because the census data don't support the analysis to get the population in a 10-minute walk. You know, rural areas, the 10-minute walk standard doesn't apply as well in rural areas. That's just, you know, people tend to drive places and there's a lot of natural areas around. So we've decided to just keep that 10-minute walk standard in urban areas and urban adjacent areas. But a lot of suburban areas are going to be included in ParkServe because they still count as urban, like they're suburban, but they're still an urbanized area based on the census. So you know, if you go into a place and you don't see it in ParkServe, you know, you can like zoom to the urban area and that might incorporate it, like that button that I showed. But otherwise that's just because it's like an unincorporated area that is like too rural to be considered urban. And so therefore it's kind of just outside of the extent of the tool.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, we have a question from Tom Douglas, and after that, a question from Russell Schneckstader. Oops, I'm going to mispronounce that every time I think. But first, Tom Douglas.
Yeah, it looked like going away, the very two biggest parks in our whole area are the Addicks Reservoir and the Barker Reservoir. Is there an easy way to tell that part of the time, at least, those are going to be open water as opposed to open land?
So let me just go back in here. So you mean these two?
Yes.
No, yeah. Okay. So you're saying that these are mostly open water?
Well, let me kick in here as the flooding guy in the group. If you look at the total number of days that these reservoirs are, and they don't fill up completely with every event. Some have, that we have all become very familiar with of late. It depends on the size of the event and how quickly the water can get out of there. But on the whole, I would say these parks are available 98% of the time.
Yeah, so I would also just add that in general, we don't erase out open water in the middle of a park. And so if it's like really big and the city has that set up that way, then we will. But like small little ponds in the park and stuff like that, water features, that we tend not to erase that out.
Yeah, well, these reservoirs are dry most of the time, other than, you know, some wetlands that are in there. They are basically, for all intents and purposes, dry.
Tom, next I have a question from Russell.
I think he's muted.
I think he is too. Well, we'll come back for that. We did have a question in the chat that Kristen answered, does this include neighborhood parks or just city parks? And he said it also includes neighborhood parks in any publicly accessible open spaces.
That's right. Okay, so then I'm actually gonna just, because I don't want to go over my time here, I'm gonna switch if you don't mind, Andrea, switching focus over to the ParkSmart Precinct 1 tool, just super briefly, and then we can address all questions at once, if that makes sense.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So let's see. The ParkServe, ParkSmart Precinct 1. Okay. So this project we finished up a couple of years ago, and I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but this is specific for a big chunk of Harris County. And it's kind of like ParkServe, but in much more detail. So there's all these buttons. There's a description of it. There's all of this information that includes a written report for the project. It's kind of long. This beautiful story map that explains exactly what we mapped in the tool and why. And then there's a user guide that is that's going to tell you everything that you need to know to navigate the site. There is printable PDF maps, a data description table, and then this describes the data that's in here. So this is the mapping portal, and it will require you to log in, and all you have to do is hit create new account, fill out a little form. It'll send you an email, and then you'll be allowed access. It's publicly accessible, but password protected. It's just like having an account. So I'm going to log in, and like I said, I'm not going to go into great detail, but this tool has like a lot of the data that ParkServe has. It's just for this study area, but we have tons of information in here across a ton of different data sources, and like prioritization analysis in here. So like, for example, socioeconomic vulnerability. You can try to say like, okay, so if you're interested in health, heat and poor air quality, socioeconomic vulnerability, and flooding and water quality, you can kind of mess with the scenario tool, and it'll give you, show you how, where the priority is to put in new parks that address those specific topics. And it is just like super in depth. And this project impact tool is similar to the one in ParkServe. You can draw and print PDF maps, etc. There's also a function to query data. So you can say like, I want to know, I ran this over here. I ran a query where just in Pasadena, I want to look at vacant parcels in block groups where percent people of color is greater than 30%. And there's flooding and water quality priority, and it gives you a table of the results, and you can kind of cruise around and view the results on the map. And there's just a ton of information in here. So it's really in depth. Use the user guide or send me an email. But I just wanted to make sure people were aware that this existed in the world, and its URL I will put in the chat. And I think that's all I've got for y'all. So I'll continue to take questions, or we can move on. It's up to you guys.
Hey, thank you. I want to try Russell again. Oh, still muted.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Yes, sir. Thank you.
My question is regards to the use of the term Greenway. The Houston Parks and Recreation Department requires the Willow Waterhole Green Space Conservancy to use the name Willow Waterhole Greenway, whereas the Conservancy had originally chosen the name Willow Waterhole Conservation Reserve as the name of the park. Do you think that the term Greenway actually applies to the Willow Waterhole Detention Basin, which is the topic that Bill Burhans is going to talk about next? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I think that might be better for Glenn or Bill to respond to.
And I'm going to defer to Glenn since he's got a greater history and knows the evolution of probably the naming also.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a stab at this right now. The the situation about coming to the Greenway name was something that the Parks Department insisted on because the land was all the land belonged to Harris County Flood Control District. But we went into a what's called an interlocal agreement with them to create some park spaces within the overall Willow Waterhole, because the Willow Waterhole was intended from our standpoint to be a large multi-celled detention facility for flood control purposes. But we were more than willing to work with, it could have been the city of Houston, it could have been the precinct 1, to do multiple uses on the same land. And we worked together in terms of design and all of this. But because it wasn't a park to the city of Houston, they decided they wanted to use the term Parkway. And not Parkway, I just blanked. Greenway, as opposed to park. And that was how the naming came about. So that's.
Yes, but do you think it's really an appropriate description of what exists, of what people go to, why they go there? Many people, it's one of the best birding sites in Houston. And it's because of the lakes, it's because of the wetlands around the lakes. But the city of Houston, by using the word Greenway, is not recognizing that.
Well, I can't comment on that specifically. I don't know. We can, it's a matter of whose definition appeals to whom. But I don't know. I don't know how else to answer that.
Russell, when we've asked the city a similar question, they've really kind of danced around it. And we've never gotten one straight answer. It's often there's different reporting requirements if it's called a park versus a greenway versus whatever else. And so, we'll continue to ask them to see if we can get something that's more definitive. But that is their preference. Like Glenn said, once the flood control brought in the city as a partner, that's what they asked it to be called.
I thank you, Glenn and Bill. I think we have a couple more questions, or at least one more question for Kristen before we move forward into the Greenway presentation. And this one I think might apply to more than just this city. It's about if there may be some parks missing. Angie Merton said she was looking at League City and there are no parks showing west of I-45, and she knows that there's parks there. So what do we do when when we know there's parks somewhere that aren't showing up on the map?
Yeah, so in the ParkServe mapping application, on the lower right-hand side, there's a big blue button that says, "Are we missing parks in your community?" So if you just click on that button, it gives you an opportunity to either email us directly with comments, or it'll open up what we call the Park Reviewer. And any missing parks that you notice, you can literally draw them in and submit them, and we'll have them up and showing in the map in about a month. So we have a really straightforward update process that anyone can engage in. So that's a great question. And for more specific questions, you feel free to email me. But yeah, that blue button should be able to get most of the edits done, because sometimes it's hard to keep up with all the data in the world. So we would love your help and your comments on park data edits.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat, and I don't see any additional hands raised. I want to Thank you, Kristen, for taking time out of your day to come and share this information with us today. And if you
Thanks
want
so
to,
much for having me.
if you want to add your email to the chat
Yes. good
so people
idea.
can reach you, I'll probably send it out in a follow-up to everybody as well, just in case. And with that, I will turn it back over to Glenn for the next presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen. By the way, Kristen and I have worked together on at least one or two associated projects over the last several years. And really, I am personally impressed with the work that they've done and have seen it ramp up in its applicability and it's and the data it can provide just over the time that I've been watching it. So hooray, y'all keep up the good work. Okay, we're going to shift gears now. And I think Bill's basically going to drive this. Bill Burns is with the Willow Waterhole Conservancy. And he's going to do the bulk of the heavy lifting on this thing. And I'm going to pop in for a couple of items that have to do with environmental regulatory matters on parts of the Greenway. So Bill, take it away.
Thank you, Glenn. And thanks for everybody in attendance. My name is Bill Burhans. I'm the president of the Willow Waterhole Green Space Conservancy. I've been a volunteer for the Conservancy for 7 years. The entire Conservancy is made up of volunteers. And so we're a hardworking group. And just to say a little bit about the first slide here, the property is dual purpose. The property was purchased by the Flood Control District for flooding and flooding mitigation. And the community and environmental organizations got together and requested that it also be developed as green space. So now a partnership exists, and this really is the model for the future of Houston as far as combining flood mitigation and community green space. So we hope that it's replicated many more times because it solves two problems. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Oops, I just had a delayed reaction there on my button. Okay, so for those of you who haven't had a chance to make it out to the Greenway, this gives you an idea where we're located. We're fairly close in. It's a reasonable drive from most places in the city. Of course, if there's not a high commute time, commuter time between 7 and 8 and probably 5 and 6, but it's close in. So we'd love to have you come visit us at that address. This is an aerial view and gives you a little bit of history. We mentioned that the flood control purchased the acreage. It's 291 in total, and construction on the flood related amenities started in 2003. Shortly after that, a grant was given by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department of $750,000 to start the Greenway side. So we have some trails, some gazebos, signage, picnic tables, benches, as a result of that grant early on. And that was in the 2004 time period. Just to give you an idea of how much money has been spent, $75 million of federal funds were provided for the project. And the main goal is to hold water back from going into Brays Bayou. I think most of you remember when the medical center flooded. And of course, with the evaluation of that area, this was a project that has a great return on investment. So it was finished in 2019. So unfortunately, it was not in play for Hurricane Harvey. But we have had 2 events since then where water did go over the weirs and into the flood control compartments. And so it has been tested out, not to full capacity, but the engineering mechanics of getting water into them has been fully tested. This map gives you an idea, the 6 lakes, how they're connected, and some of the amenities that have been developed. And every one of these lakes has a connection point. And so when the county came in to buy the property, once they could make those connections, they didn't need any other property. So it is kind of unusual that you will see facilities kind of in the middle, what you might call the middle. Like, for example, in this area here is a convent. You see my cursor going. Right here, there's apartment complex. This is a former Shell research facility. There's a school here, but all these are connected. Connection point here for these lakes, here, here, and here. And here's Willow Waterhole Bayou right here. So the water comes down, the bayou spills into 2 weirs, one on Scout Lake, one on Dog Lake, and then those can then drain into these other lakes, over 600 million gallons in a flooding event. So I have a lot of pictures to follow, and I'm shortly going to turn it over to Glenn to talk about wetlands and also our native prairie preserve. So let's take a look at some of the pictures. I think you'll be astounded. There's a lot of elevation change, a lot of greenery now. The trees are growing. So let's launch into that. You recognize the photo on left because that's the background on my screen also. And that was a winter day with a little bit of fog and some wetlands on the right. And now Glenn is going to go ahead and talk about the environment and wetlands.
Helps find mute. Okay. As you see here, we maintain 12% of that total property of Willow Waterhole as protected wetlands. Let me give you a little context for this and for another part that I'm going to do later. And I'm going to start with our mission statement so that everybody kind of understands where we're coming from in this. And that our mission statement is to plan, construct, and maintain flood damage risk reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. In addition, when the district was created by the 1937 Texas legislature, that legislation confined the nature of those projects strictly to addressing riverine flooding in Harris County. When the district creates wetlands, plants lots of native woody vegetation in our project and other things of that nature, it's not specifically being done to create a habitat and improve water quality in and of itself. It is to be fully compliant with all federal, state, and local laws and regulations. If we have to comply with those laws, then it becomes something that can be tied to our marching orders in that we can't build the project unless we comply with these regulations. Okay, so we do it for that reason. But when we do it, we want to do it to the best possible level we can, knowing what it's going to create just because of what it is. Okay, so with all of that said, this there's a bit over 36 acres of emergent herbaceous wetlands at Willow Waterhole. We establish these and maintain them in the wet bottom ponds of the individual wet bottom basins within the whole detention project. And it is the same amount of pre-existing forested and scrub shrub wetlands are now being replaced with these emergent herbaceous ones. For people that want to know about, well, the nuances of this, this is done under NEPA, in this case, the National Environmental Protection Act, Policy Act rather, and Executive Order 11990. It's different than Section 404. Under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, we would have had to create the same identical types of wetlands that we had to destroy in doing this. But in this case, because it was not under Section 404, we were able to negotiate this with the Corps of Engineers and to use emergent wetlands in place of what had been there before. So we coordinated with them through the whole process. And that's the reason we have done what we've done and how we've done it. And we think we've done a pretty good job of creating these wetlands and maintaining them so that they will continue to function as they are supposed to function in the coming years. Back to you, Bill.
Yeah, just to mention the pictures, Glenn.
Yeah,
you can see on the top left picture there, the band of brown is maintained as wetlands. It's a different type vegetation. So you got the beautiful picture of bluebonnets in the foreground and wetlands in the around the lakes.
right.
And then,
And in some cases, I'll add, we have added some woody vegetation in there. So, but it's primarily emergent wetlands.
And I wanted to mention on the lower left, this area used to be quite a while ago rice fields, and the area on the bottom left is near where the rice farmer's house was, and he created some swales and other drainage to take the water away from his house, which has turned into nice wetlands. And we've actually built an arboretum of understory plants in some of those areas. And that's the picture on the left. The picture on the right, some signage that we've had put in the park that explains about wetlands, educational signage. So Russell mentioned this earlier in his question, that Willow Waterhole has developed because of the wetlands and the lakes and the trees and everything that goes with it. That is now a major site for birding, and the Houston Audubon Society conducts monthly bird counts. In fact, this week is Bird Week in Houston for the Audubon Society, and there's 2 events this week that the society has chosen to hold at the Willow Waterhole. You can find out about those on the Houston Audubon site. One is on Saturday and one is on Sunday. Then Texas Parks and Wildlife Department did studies on the water and determined that fish would do well. And so they have stocked for 4 years in several of the lakes. They haven't stocked since 2019 due to COVID. But they put catfish, bass, and sunfish in the lakes. We have had some visitors, uninvited visitors. You can see on the right side there a picture of an armored catfish, which is a tropical fish, and they found their way. We suspect somehow from probably Bray's Bayou. There's tilapia, which is not the source of Luby's cafeteria, by the way, but we do have tilapia at Willow Waterhole. And the picture on the left is Alice Best, who's a regional manager for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. This was at the last fish count study. And here's our rules. We do have a increasing number of people fishing out there. And we are hearing successes, mostly around catfish. The catfish are getting bigger, and most of the fish stories are about catfish. But we follow Texas Parks and Wildlife regulations as far as licensing and other things. And we keep people out of the wetlands. That's one of our roles also. Now I'm going to switch back to Glenn. He has the history of when they started doing the construction, the discovery of some endangered and threatened plants.
Yes, and again, back to just remember my context on the situation with the wetlands. We're in a similar situation here, but being in the same project, Corps of Engineers project, we were complying with NEPA, and in this case, it involved the Endangered Species Act. So we had to, rather than coordinate specifically with the Corps of Engineers, we got to be very good buddies with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. One, as you see here, there's about this whole ecosystem thing. There was originally, this was prairie. It was wet prairie, wet native prairie. It had nobody had ever put a plow to it. It was wet enough that it was mostly used for cattle grazing for decades, going all the way back well into the 19th century. And even though it wasn't plowed, and plowing, of course, would have wrecked these things, these MEMA mounds that exist on the site that these plants grow on. Actually, they grow around the edges of it at its base. It had never been plowed, but the overgrazing that had occurred over the years, over the decades, had sort of set this thing up for a situation that we had to deal with once we discovered that there were two still present populations, the Texas prairie dawn, which, by the way, Hymenopsis texana is its scientific name, used to be called in the old days Texas bitterweed. And the new Texas prairie dawn name actually was the result of a contest among school children to get it renamed. But at any rate, because we discovered these two, what had happened in the intervening years between the mid-1970s and when we bought the land and began to look at how we're going to deal with it. The owners, the previous owners, had been running cattle on it, and then the 1970s came along and oil prices went up. Development started going crazy in Houston, and like most other property owners who had been sort of keeping their undeveloped property in ag exemption by running cattle on it, did what they all do. They pull the cattle off of it in anticipation of a sale to get a lot of money for the land. Well, nobody bought it for a while. What happened was, because of all the disturbance, woody vegetation began to establish itself in what had been prairie for tens of thousands of years. And between the mid-1970s and the 1990s, the place was getting covered up in various and sundry trees, yopon, all sorts of things, and it was beginning to choke these plants out. And Fish and Wildlife said, we've got to make sure these populations continue to exist. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to get as much of the woody vegetation gone and reestablish the native prairie. So that will help to preserve these plants. And that's the program that we came up with to deal with the situation. Okay, Bill? So here's an aerial view of the situation that we have here. This is one big chunk of land that we bought. It was the largest single chunk that we bought. And the original intent was that the whole thing was going to be a detention basin. We had to make adjustments because as you can see here, there's PMA is a prairie management area. You can see two of them. One's about 10 acres, one is about 5. There is a population of Hymenopsis in each one of them. I won't point them out, but they had to be protected. One thing was we have eventually done a lot of fencing and in fact double fencing because the actual areas of these populations are super fenced to keep anybody out of them and disturb them. So we have gone through the process and we didn't just work on that alone. We did it in combination with the ability to have control public access to the area. One of the accesses that are not allowed is ATVs and stuff like that. So we've allowed it where people can get in and we have a whole lot of trails and some signage about what's going on out there. So we did an overall plan for this site that included the prairie management area and tying it in to the trails that were being built around the lake, which we call Prairie Lake over there. And by the way, if you look very closely in the eastern end of the lake and around the 2 islands that we constructed in this, what you are seeing along with the edges is a lot of emergent wetland vegetation. Yeah, there you go, Bill. Thank you. And Azakura Robinson did the plan for the Conservancy and us. We all worked together on this thing and are pleased with the results. So a whole lot of people had their fingers in the pie and it has worked out very well. Okay, next slide. So talk about the very specific thing in the Azakura Robinson Master Plan. As you saw on the previous slide, the basin and the Prairie Preserve trails were part of it. Benches, trash receptacles along the trails, trailheads on various sides of all of this with signage, bike racks, trash receptacles, particularly on Gasmer on the south and the end of Wynwood on the north. A footbridge over Wynwood Trailhead Ditch, 4 viewing areas with picnic table clusters, 2 along the basin and 2 in the Prairie Preserve, an outdoor classroom in the Prairie, restrooms and parking at the Gasmer Trailhead. There's still some additional proposed projects, pedestrian bridge over South Post Oak Road, to tie it into the bulk of the rest of the complex, trail connection to Houston Parks Board and Endangered Plant and a potential Endangered Plant Research Center. All of these are a little on the pricey side and yet to be funded. And so a little bit about the Texas Prairie Dawn, the thing that triggered this whole thing. They are very sensitive plants. I've got to emphasize this from the get-go. They've been around a while. They have a very limited range. And you got to go looking for them, but you can't look for them throughout the year About the only time you can spot them is late March, early April. It blooms. In our office, we got to calling it the Q-tip plant because it's a little flower spike that comes up. Looks like somebody clipped off one end of a Q-tip, dipped the other end in pale yellow dye, food coloring, stuck it in the ground in the middle of a bunch of tiny little leaves. And that's about the only way you can spot this thing. And it's only during this time of year. These things really have only been found in Fort Bend, Harris, and Waller. And it's because they grow at the base of these mima mounds that I mentioned earlier, which only occur on certain soil types in this area. They're not anywhere and everywhere. And so they sort of come in clusters wherever these soil types are and where you've got areas where the mima mounds are still intact. It's highly sensitive to habitat disturbance, and it's very unpredictable in terms of its reproductive success. You cannot figure out, just because you've got a thriving population this season, you may never see it again after that. Or sometimes new ones will spring up. Or ones that have been around a while seem to have disappeared and then they come back. So it's fun to deal with this little character. Oh, and one other thing, there's a lot of places where these are on private property. They are not protected. One of the weird things about the Endangered Species Act was that unlike animals of all kinds, they're protected everywhere. Plants are only protected on public property. And so they can be destroyed on private property and nothing can be done about it. So these guys just happen to be lucky enough to end up in public ownership. All right, and move on from there.
So before I go to this next slide, I did want to mention, to tail on with Glenn's section there, we wanted to make sure that this group knew about that area because we've recently been informed by the flood control that development can occur in accordance with the master plan. So we are seeking assistance and funding from any of you experts out there, or any of you that could be connected to foundations that would be interested in making this a go-to place for Houston. With its connectivity to the rest of Willow Waterhole and to some of the Houston Parks Board trails, and the whole park being fairly close in, this is something special. So we would like you to pass the word around. Okay, so this slide here, I want to talk a little bit about trails. One of the major dreams of the Conservancy is to have trails around each of these lakes. And currently we have some trails here that are courtesy of that original Texas Parks and Wildlife grant I mentioned in 2004. And then we have that also included here. And then we have a small section here that came to be from the Department of Interior's Coastal Impact Assistance Program. But we would like all these green dirt / grass trails to be eventually developed. And so when Glenn was mentioning that one of the items for Prairie Lake was the pedestrian bridge, it could go over South Post Oak here. And then he also mentioned a trail connection to the Center Point easement, which would be about right here. So if you can imagine all of these trails connected, we'd have over 5 miles of trails accessible. And I'll bring in Kristen's presentation also. if you would zero in on this area in Kristen's tool, you would see that this is in what's called a HUD LMI district. And so it has a high percentage of minorities, has lots of schools, has a convent, a hospital, um, a senior assistance living center. And so this really would impact a lot of people that are not supported now. So anyway, that's the plan as far as trails. And I'm here to also announce to you that as part of the ParkSmart program by Precinct 1 that started in 2017, we started advocating with Commissioner Rodney Ellis, and he has just announced a couple months ago that he will be funding this particular lake's trails. It's 2 miles, and construction starts in December. So this by far is a huge deal for our park, the biggest investment ever on the park side. So we welcome everybody out to explore, and in December you'll find this completely developed as far as trails. The other thing I want to mention is that this lake also has become the premier cross-country venue for high school invitationals. We have 5 cross-country invitationals now that are held, and this lake has quite an elevation change because they build a berm along parallel to Highway 90. The berm is right here, and that berm is about 75 feet elevation. And if you get to lake level, it's about 15 feet elevation. So that's highly unusual in Houston. And when you get on top of this berm and you look out, you can see downtown, the medical center. It's just a grand view.
Hey, if
And
I
the
can kick in, Bill, about the berm.
Yeah,
When we built that berm, it was for 2 reasons. The primary one was hauling dirt, that much dirt costs money, and you got to find a place to haul it to. That was one thing. And the other one was, in putting it in, we would be sound buffering against the railroad and the highway. And those 2 things together have worked to really make that a very desirable park area over there, instead of something that was exposed to that kind of noise on an ongoing basis.
it definitely does its job as far as muting the noise. These are just some pictures we took as construction was finishing up in 2018 and 19 on the last 2 lakes and the weirs. And the one on the left is weir construction, and the one on the right is actually a culvert underneath the street to connect one lake to the other. So once the flood control completes the work to excavate the compartment, then they typically about a year later, after the ground is established on the banks, then they come in and put in trees. And so they added trees to those last 2 lakes that were built. And then the last 2 bullet items I like to mention, because there has been attempts by the flood control to keep the carp out of some of the aquatic and wetlands vegetation. And Glenn, you might want to say a few words about that. The carp somehow found their way underneath the fences. So anyway, other methods are still being tried.
Yeah, it's interesting that all of our troubles there are with introduced invasive species.
Yep. Oh, I want to also mention, Glenn, that the February deep cold spell that we had, I mentioned the armored catfish were tropical. We did lose a lot of the armored catfish population, which was something that was good for the lakes.
Yes,
Um,
it was. Unfortunately, it probably didn't get them all. And we've been trying to figure out some biological controls of those things. And given the nature of them, if you've ever seen them up close, there's only 3 predators that we know that can go after these things. And that's alligators, alligator gar, and alligator snapping turtle. They're the only things big enough and mean enough to take on one of these fish, because the spikes that they've got all around them are pretty hideous.
These are some conservancy events and amenities that the community has been project manager and has led fundraising. And I'm going to show you pictures of all these. But the major point is that the community is extremely active in improving the green space side. And so I will tell you that the number of visitors out there has increased greatly as we've added more things for people to do. And just the visual beauty has, of course, attracted people with the elevation change, the lakes, the trees, the wildflowers, birds. And we're extremely proud of our Scout program, over 60 Eagle and Gold Award projects to date. And we hold conservation work days with community groups. Here's a sign that was placed in by the CIAP grant that I mentioned earlier. This was put in 2017. And so in the background is the convent I mentioned. On the right side is Gasmer Road and the left side is South Willow. You're looking east. Here's what we call a pocket prairie that was installed on that same lake. It's kind of a quilted sidewalk patchwork thing where each of these little segments have different native prairie plants. It's maintained by a community group, mostly elderly ladies that are totally committed to this piece of property. It's wonderful in the springtime. This is the Schwartz gazebo I mentioned. I know Glenn knows a Bob Schwartz who passed away in 17, and we named the gazebo after him. He was instrumental in a lot of the early things that happened out at the property, and also in the group that was really pushing to buy the property for flood control. And we've added flagpoles. Scouts have built an arboretum and built a trail, and Russell Schexneder, who's on this line, has been a big donator to the Conservancy and has funded many of the Scout projects, including this trail. So it's a very nice amenity. We have another very generous donor, Bruce Curinghouse, who's interested in birds and Scout projects. And this is a chimney swift tower with an information kiosk around it. We have a trail that's maintained by one of the local troops that takes visitors from South Willow Drive to the Willow Waterhole Bayou. You can see on the left-hand side in the background is the weir that connects to the bayou. And here's just some pictures of all the events, a lot of the events. A lot of the events, as you can see, are with youth. That's one of the things that we're proud of, is that we involve area youth in a lot of our projects. And I can tell you, as Conservation Committee chair, that some of these kids have never held a shovel, dug a hole, planted a tree, trimmed a tree. So they're doing things for the first time. It's very enjoyable to watch. We now have a Scout pavilion where we recognize every Scout who does their Gold or Eagle project. It's named after Dabney Kennedy, who's a local and national leader in Scouting. And when it opened in 2020, you can see the mayor and our local city council person, Martha Castex Tatum, were present for the grand opening. We just opened this new amenity in the past year. We call it the Naturescape Garden. They're wooden sculptures done by a fellow by the name of Jimmy Phillips, who you may have seen some of his work in Galveston after Hurricane Ike. We commissioned him to place these at a scenic overlook at Westbury Lake. And it's turned out to be just a fantastic place for people to gather. We have picnic tables and benches around. I mentioned the cross-country meets. Some of these meets we have 2,000 people attend. So it's a very big deal. Every year we have a music fest. The last two music fests in April have been canceled due to COVID. And so we've rescheduled, and we have the current music fest scheduled for October 30th. And you can see from the aerial, it's a beautiful site to hold an event. And we have both youth and adult bands who participate. Then I just wanted, just in the last year, mention some of the things that have happened. If anybody would like to be a subscriber to our newsletter, my email is, I'll show you, the last slide has my email address. You can send me an email. I mentioned some of the other things that the community has been involved in and that individual donors have provided. We've done a lot of maintenance activities ourselves. We've announced, I announced previously the trail investment. We've had a lot of help from Braze Oaks Management District on maintenance projects, and they're now paying for design of some property that's been purchased next door, which I'm going to show you a picture of. So there's a lot of things that are happening, just a huge amount of interest and volunteering from the community. Here's what we'd like to complete in the years ahead. I can announce to you that the first item on the list has been funded, and construction is due to start this month. So we will have the main entrance in the park. It was really a third world gravel road with potholes and just a lot of difficulty getting into the park, and now it's going to be paved. Should be done by the Music Fest. I mentioned some of the other items, and the fifth bullet has to do with the property, the former Shell property. And then we have some other projects. These are all in our 5-year plan. This is the Shell property I mentioned that's next door. It was a Shell research facility, and the city bought it with federal flood money. And so the plans are to use a portion of it for detention, and the rest, the city has basically come to the community and said, we're open to ideas. So Braze Oaks Management has agreed to fund a master plan. The community will be involved in public input sessions, and those ought to be starting probably in October, November timeframe. But there's a lot of ideas already out there. The idea is to preserve some of the iconic oil industry structures, and also utilize buildings for possible theater, community center, and then to build a music pavilion. And so this is just adjacent to Westbury High School. If you'd like to be a member of our conservancy, go to willowwaterhole.org/membership. We have memberships at $50, $100, and $500. And so we appreciate everyone's support. And here you go. Here's the email address and some of the websites to go to find out more information. So I'll just leave it there for a second if anybody wants to copy those down. And So I hope from this presentation that you learned about our facility, and you can see that the future is bright. And if we duplicate what we've done here with flood control and community green space, Houston will be a great place to live, and it'll solve two problems. And I want to thank you again for attending and listening to the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Burhan. We talked about this, Burhans, right?
Correct.
Okay. I appreciate you taking your time today and sharing all this. It's really, really interesting. I know we talked when we had our little rehearsal about, I met with the TCEQ out at this property back in, I think it was 2011, and it was nothing but a picnic table. And so just to see your pictures and how this has grown and become something really special is just incredible in a pretty short amount of time. So I think it's really fantastic what you all are doing out there at the Willow Waterhole. We do have a couple of questions and a conversation going on in the chat, the conversation about some additional basins and wetlands in the area, including one that has some of that elusive prairie dawn Q-tip plant, if you want to go take a look at it, the Katy Prairie. But we'll start with some of the questions. First, if Glenn could address the question of whether flood control is replicating this model on other detention basins.
Okay. We have over the years tried to work with anybody and everybody in the county in terms of municipalities, the precincts, obviously, because, you know, we're first cousins there, municipal utility districts, so forth. Right off the top of my head, there are 3 of these that I'll name. And one of them that a lot of people know about is Keith Wise Park. It's up in the north central part of the county. All on, in fact, it's on either side of Hall's Bayou. It's City of Houston Park. Lands go back to the 50s. Development has been recent. And we went into an agreement with them where we took 111 acres sort of in the middle of the park and made a major detention basin. So this was kind of the other way around with the city of Houston, where they had the land. We got an easement, created this basin, and the basin again has lots of wetlands and lots of new trees, planted trees, native trees and shrubs have been planted. And all of this was in close coordination with the city of Houston. And we didn't have any regulatory basis for any of the stuff we did. It was just agreed upon together. The one thing that was kind of regulatory was the wetlands that were put in there. We counted them as part of our MS4 permit, or that we work under, where we try to that we've been trying here for the last decade and more of cleaning up stormwater before it goes into major streams. We also have a similar kind of thing off Beltway 8 Precinct 2, Gene Green Park, which fronts on Carpenter's Bayou. We dug out a huge amount there for detention, and one that has been ongoing for a while in Precinct 3 is Zuby Park up on Little Cypress. So those are kind of large scale versions of this. We have done other projects, and we're always looking for people to work with to do these things. So the answer is yes.
We have another question in the chat: is, would covering trails with impervious surface interfere with the flood mitigation function of the water hole? And would you need to be careful about those kind of trails and potential erosion?
Well, I can tell you that the the trails that Rodney Ellis is funding, they're going to be a combination of concrete and crushed granite. And part of the decision making on the trails has to do with maintenance. And so the city and the county have probably seen along bayous, for example, the bayous programs, they're concrete trails. And some of these out at Willow Waterhole will be 10-foot wide concrete. And we were able to get some of the trails to be crushed granite because we asked that on behalf of coaches for cross country because they prefer crushed granite. So, but that decision really is made by the people like the Parks Board and Precinct 1 and the city who have responsibility for maintenance.
But at least was from the standpoint of flood control, those kinds of things per se do not hinder what we're doing because it, again, I think proper maintenance will be ongoing there, not by us, because obviously these are overlays on what we're doing, but we do also weigh in on these kinds of things and we have to approve them. Anything done on our property, we got to approve, obviously. And we don't see it hindering any aspects of our stormwater detention program.
Thank you. I think we have two more quick questions, maybe quick, in the chat. It's one, we would be really interested in seeing a list of those Eagle Scout projects if you have one available. I know you probably don't have it available right now, but if you have one you could share with us later that we could share with everyone.
Yes, I'd love to forward that to you, Andrea, if you can then send it from there.
Absolutely. And the other question is, I know that we have some canoeing and kayaking options coming up with that music festival improvements that are on the horizon, but are there any opportunities for canoeing and kayaking now?
Yes, we have a number of people that are enjoying both of those. They're launching from, you saw several pictures of bridges. And so the main launch points are near those bridges. It's more convenient at Westbury Lake. And I also want to mention that one of the items on the list of capital projects is a pier, which would make it even easier to launch. And that would also be at Westbury Lake. But we do see people canoeing and kayaking now.
Okay, great, thank you. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. I don't see any hands raised. So I think we might be, oh, someone asked if you could back up to the previous slide, please.
I'm hitting the up arrow and I'm not sure what to, remind me what was on the last slide.
I think that was the flyer for how to become a member, maybe?
Okay.
Having trouble getting it in reverse, Bill?
Yes, I am. This car only works in drive, I guess, because I'm having trouble. I'm continuing to hit the.
That is technology, but you'll share these slides with me after this meeting and I can post them online and anyone can go back and take a look at them. So I know we would, we'll keep moving forward.
I did want to offer to, if any of you would like somebody from the Conservancy to present at your organization, so you could learn more, then also contact us for that. And one thing I forgot to say, because I'm a proud Shell retiree, is that the purchase of the Shell Research Center, Shell essentially donated $6 million because they sold the property to the city at $6 million under appraised value. And so that's what's making both detention and the community use project I talked about possible. So I just wanted to get that plug in.
Oh, nothing wrong with giving a shout out to your funder. We really appreciate anybody who's able to help us fund these projects. So again, Bill, thank you. Kristen, thank you. We invite you to stick around for the rest of the meeting. But we'll move on to the rest of the agenda, where we're going to talk about our P&A Awards and Recognition Program. And then if we have time, we'll go over our roundtable. So let me share the screen and I will turn this back over to Glenn Laird.
Hey. There we are. Okay. As you can see here, we've been through the first two steps in the process. Back earlier in the year, we reviewed the application and selected the judges. More on that later. We've advertised the awards and solicited applications in August. We are now in that acceptance phase, which goes through the whole month of September. Once that's done, the judging begins in early October. And then at the P&A roundtable review will be done via email in late October to review those recommendations from the judges. After that, in early November, we will go before Natural Resource Advisory Committee to get their blessing on those. Late in the year or early the next year, we'll notify the winners, and then the recognition event will be held sometime in probably late January, early February. On to the next slide. And here are our judges. Janice Barral, who is with Kindig Keast from the consultant category, and I think she's done this a couple of times for us. Casey Collins with Half and Associates, landscape architect. Kimberly Judge, City of Dayton, the wild card. Mac Martin from Texas A&M Forest Service, who is a water quality expert. Frank Weary, who is with Exploration Green Conservancy, a past award winner. And Lily Wells from Texas Southern University as the person from academia. And so that is where we currently stand.
I just wanted to let everyone know that I posted in the chat a flyer for the Parks and Natural Areas Awards. I'd love for you to take a look, apply for an award if you have anything that's eligible, share it with your friends if you think they have anything eligible, because we love to learn about these projects and to recognize the best practices in parks and natural areas around our region. So it is roundtable time. Normally I say normally, it's been about a year since we've been normally anything, but we usually go around the table and everyone talks about what you have going on. For the sake of ease and we don't all unmute at the same time, I'm just going to go down the list and call on you and let you tell us if you have anything going on that you want to share with everybody, or if you have any comments or feedback to give us today. This list is mostly alphabetical. When people start unmuting, the list changes. So if I miss you, give me a shout out and we'll catch back up with you. Okay, so first we have Andrea Gavia. Okay, we'll come back. How about Angie Mertens?
I don't really have anything to add, but thanks for having us up from the League City Board today. We enjoyed y'all's presentation.
Thanks for coming, and also thank you for unmuting. So I didn't think that maybe everybody couldn't all of a sudden. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Bob Duzan. All right, Brittany Flowers. Oh, well, sorry, Bob.
Just real quick, I'm on the League City Parks Board also, and very interesting presentation. Learned a lot from this. I'd like to learn a little more, and we probably like to have this told to some Galveston County people. So thank you for this, and appreciate it.
Right, thank you. Brittany Flowers.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I don't really have anything to add. I would just like to introduce myself. I am the new CEO and president with Bayou Preservation Association. And so I look forward to working with you all in the near future. And this has been a great opportunity to learn more about what's going on in the region.
Great, thank you. It's nice to meet you. We will be working with you a lot in the future. Looking forward to it.
Good.
So Cassidy Kemp.
Hi, my name's Cassidy. I'm with Parks Department's Natural Resource Management Program. Sorry, Houston Parks and Recreation Department. We're just going along as usual, working on our prairie and riparian restorations and doing some policy work within the department. Good to see everyone.
Thank you. Colleen Gilbert.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this today. It was a great presentation. I'm Colleen Gilbert with Greens Bayou Coalition, and we are excited to finally start having our REACH meetings. Our Northwest REACH is going to be meeting on September 23rd to decide priority parks and trails projects along our Greens Bayou watershed. And we have shifted our committees a little bit. We used to have 4 REACHs, and now we're basically going with a Northwest and a Southeast. We'll see how that goes. But then I also have somebody who has volunteered to chair an environmental and conservation committee, and they're going to do all our tree plantings and park cleanups and bayou cleanups and so forth. So we're very excited about that. And we're finally getting back out there. So we're finally going to have our annual luncheon on November 5th, and I invite all of you to join us.
Thank you. If you have a link to the luncheon or to your website or to any of that, if you want to put it in the chat for us, that'd be
Will do.
Great and handy. And I'll also send that out to everyone in a follow-up.
Thanks.
Next is Frank Blake.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, I'm with the Houston Sierra Club, and I just wanted to mention that we have in the past led outings to Willow Waterhole, and we hope to start doing that again as soon as COVID calms down a little bit. I did want to mention again the potential for trail erosion with hard surface paths, where especially in Houston, we don't have too many environments with slopes. And so I think that that's an unanticipated problem at times, but I walk frequently in Buffalo Bayou Park, and the hard surface trails there really collect water. And whenever you come to a low point, you have significant water pour off and erosion. And it's something that really needs to be considered when laying out trails, because it's hard to correct after the fact. There aren't easy solutions to that type of erosion. So thanks.
A day of planning ahead of time can save you years of planning at the end, right? Next up is Garrett Nenninger.
Good morning. I'm also from the League City Parks Board with Angie Dickinson and Bob Duzan. We like them. I enjoyed the presentation very much, but I do not have anything to add. Thank you.
Well, thank you for turning out League City Parks Board today. And next is Juan Antonio Sorto.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Antonio Sorto. I am with the Buffalo Bayou Partnership. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator. So Saturday, we are having a community engagement meeting at one of our parks that's actually part of our East Master Plan that extends from downtown all the way to the Port of Houston. So if you're interested to see how a park system is developing housing as part of their overall master plan, I invite all of you to attend our community engagement meeting this coming Saturday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Tony Morone Park, which is located on the East End 2nd Ward. 808 York Street, which is actually Waco in downtown. So that's 9 a.m. to 12 noon. And we're going to be talking about how we're connecting this particular park, Tony Marone, with our affordable housing units that are being built right adjacent to it. And that is all because we're trying to provide these amenities, the park systems amenities back to the community that is currently experiencing rapid gentrification. So once again, I invite all of you to attend this coming Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon.
Thank you. If you have any website or information, if you want to send that to me in an email, I'm happy to forward that all out to everybody who is here today.
Sure, I will do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Justin Bauer.
Hi, everyone. This is Justin Bauer with the Houston-Galveston Area Council. I don't have anything special to add other than to thank our presenters and to encourage anyone who's interested in wildlife to get out to either Willow Waterhole or the nearby Eldred Stormwater Facility, Archbishop Fiorenza Parks, as well as some of the other parks. They've been a fantastic mix of function and natural elements, so we appreciate that. The one thing I will mention is that Houston-Galveston Area Council is still currently working on its regional conservation initiative. We are interested in learning more about any projects you may have, especially if they involve local government at some point, and seeing how we can support them. We don't have funding. This is not a call for projects per se, but we do have some very talented staff and data resources, and we'd love to help you find funding or identify grants or do some spatial analysis. Please just get a hold of us and let us know, and we'll be happy to talk to you about your projects.
Thanks, Justin. Feel free to pop that web address or the email in the chat so everyone can see it. And I'll, like I said, send that out to everybody after this meeting. Next is Louis Julian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Louis Julian. I'm the Parks Programming Director for the West Chase District. We have some very exciting news. We're opening up our first public park here in the district. Over near West Park and West Park Tollway and Gessner, about a quarter mile west of there. It's called Wood Chase Park. It's a little under 2 acres. We'll have a performance pavilion, restrooms, community gardens, fenced in dog park, children's play area. And so we'll be looking to start that here, open up in the middle of October. And it does have a website, woodchasepark.com. I'll put that in the chat. We'll have free programs and events year round for the community, such as Tai Chi and boot camp and yoga and Zumba, painting workshops, gardening workshops, and then some signature events throughout the year. So thank you all so much for the great presentations. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us today. Next is Marianne Piacentini.
Hi, this is Marianne Piacentini with the Katy Prairie Conservancy. A couple of things. One, throughout the pandemic, but even needed more now than ever, is 2 of our sites are totally open to the public. One is our Warren Lake viewing platform, and that's at 15,000 Warren Ranch Road. If you go to katyprairie.org, get directions, and it's a great ADA, fully accessible viewing platform. Some people just go there to get away from the noise and the bustle of big city living. Other people go to actually look at birds. And then also our Indian Grass Preserve is open 3 days a week, Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 9 to 1. Don't try to come tomorrow because of the weather. We are closed today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. And then last but not least, we just got a formal announcement from NRCS that we got a grant to put a conservation easement on a 400-acre farm on the Katy Prairie, adding to the nearly 25,000 acres we've protected so far. That's it.
That is fantastic. Funding and conservation, 2 big wins right there. Next is Mike Burku.
Hi, this is Mike Burku from Houston One Voice. First, I would like to, and also a resident of Southwest Houston, I'd like to compliment Bill Burhans and the Willow Waterhole volunteers for some fantastic work they have done in a rather short amount of time. It goes to show you what a group can do when they're focused and solution and action oriented. And in addition to having the Willow Waterhole, they provide some leadership that I think is very valuable for anybody involved with volunteer work. Skip Reader will mention some opportunities possibly that we have in Southwest Houston further down in the roundtable. Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you for joining us today. Russell Schneckstader.
I would just like to thank Glenn for allowing Bill Burhans to do his presentation. I know that Glenn has been working on Willow Waterhole for almost 2 decades, and I thank him for all his work. Thank you.
We thank Glenn too. He had to leave, so he didn't get to hear that, but I will pass that along to him. Next is Stephen Panolshek.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm trying to get the video working. Okay, here we go. I'm president of Neighborhoods of Trail Southwest, and one of the things in our remit is trying to build off-street trails to get people to actually arrive safely at the Willow Waterhole Greenway. And so I was delighted to see Bill's presentation. He's a partner of ours in our organization and a very, very valued member. We're having our September meeting at noon on Wednesday. And our featured speaker will be the executive director of Bike Houston. So if anybody would like to join that Zoom meeting, I will leave my contact information in the chat, and hope to see maybe some new faces at our meeting on Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that invitation. I'm sure some people will want to come to that. All right, Sylvester Reader.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Sylvester Skip Reader, and I would like to echo Mike Burkew's comment to Bill Burhans. Wonderful job, Bill. If you all have not gotten to meet Bill and his staff and the board of Willow Waterhole, they're just what our community is made of. They're just high quality advocates within our community, and I'm proud to work with them and see what they've accomplished. I'd like to just give you an overview of the Willow Waterhole, excuse me, the Rufino landfill. I'm a part of Houston One Voice. Mike Burkew and I founded Houston One Voice, which is a nonprofit 501c3 partnership with the University of Houston School of Architecture, Resilient and Sustainable Architecture, and Engineering, and Rice University School of Planning and Engineering as well. The Rufino landfill is a 144-acre landfill, and that's been decommissioned for the last 30 years. And we were engaged to do a research project to determine how we could mitigate that landfill into a detention basin and a mixed use development that would pay for it. We have completed phase 1 of our research project, and you can see that in detail on our website. And our website is HoustonOneVoice.org. No spaces, small letters. And I wanted to share with you that we know that through the research that the cost of mitigating that landfill to a detention basin is going to cost between $100 to $200 million. And the reason we're looking to do a development, mixed use development of housing and commercial is to be able to pay for that using tax dollars. I'm trying to be succinct, but we had a work group to first identify what the community really needed and what the TERS 20 expected of us was to have that plan, but also from the community. And we have a discussion. The 144 acres represented a detention basin of 2,400 acre feet. And honestly, we were focused on using every square inch of that 2,400 acre feet as detention. But when we brought the work group, the work group said absolutely not. We have not seen any parks or recreation in this plan, and that is imperative. Their advocacy was significant. We knew that we would never get consensus unless we were able to somehow bring in parks and recreation, and we did. We set aside a 35 acre portion of land that would be a nature conservancy and a park with trails. You can see the plan on our website. But what's really interesting about that plan is our architects and our partners established a mixed-use development that is zero carbon base and very innovative in terms of how they're going to do that. You would enjoy seeing that because the ways they did it, I had just not been aware of. I didn't know you could use photovoltaic on streets and skins of buildings and things like that. But anyway, that's an exciting part of this process. We've been working closely with the Harris County Flood Control, and they've set a standard, really in terms of detention. For every 1,000 acre feet, that could save 500 homes. So you can see what Rufino could do in terms of saving flooding homes downstream on the raised bayou, because Keegan's Bayou is the bayou that streams through that Rufino landfill. So you understand that we wanted to use every acre feet that we possibly could, and our engineers and architects found a way that we could have a park as well as make sure there's overflow possibilities, and that's in the report as well, where the 32 acre feet, which represented 500 acre feet, which was significant for us to lose that, and we found a way not to lose it, but also to give us a very strong nature park that. But we did get consensus from the work group because of that. Our next phase is to get consensus from each one of those communities that will be affected by this detention and in the Brays Bayou watershed. And I would love to be able to introduce this in a much more concerted fashion at another time, because it's really interesting how we've used economic development to pay for what's very needed. We found another opportunity. Now, we believe that one way or another, the infrastructure plan will be passed. We don't know how it's going to look, but we believe it's an opportunity. We found another key plan for detention on the corner of Bissonnette and Cook Road. There is another landfill, very similar, if not identical to Rufino, that has been decommissioned now for 15 years. As we begin to show ways that we can convert these landfills into detention basins, it makes it easier to do that 5 miles down the road on Kirkwood and Bissonnette. That is a landfill of, again, 2,400 acre feet of water storage. That makes 5,000 acre feet between the two, and it doesn't count the ancillary that the Harris County Flood Control ancillary detention basins that they've identified to store water as well. I could go on and on, but we want you to know that what we're at right now in phase 2 is to confirm that the kind of waste that is underground in Rufino is truly household waste. If there's any methane gas that is that's leaking, and we're waiting for that to occur. The land that the landfill is on is owned by West University, the cities of West University and Bel Air, and obviously that land has to be acquired. So we're at that stage. And please, if you have any questions after you've seen our website, don't hesitate to call Mike Burkue or myself.
Thank you, Skip. It's
Thank you,
always
Andrea.
a pleasure to get to hear what you've got going on because it's so fascinating. And let's see what we can do about getting you more time in a meeting coming up, because I think you have a lot of information that a lot of people are probably going to be interested in. So next up is Tracy Tipinaro.
Okay. Oh yeah. I had a feeling my face was nowhere near the camera. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay. So, oh my God, sorry, new laptop. I don't know what I'm doing. Tracy Tipinaro, Rick Rice Park in Katy, Texas. We have 8.5 acres, and I want to echo that I loved both presentations. And I spent a couple hours yesterday with Eagle Scouts at the park putting in a new educational sign and a little library. So we're excited about that. And I had a bride call me today, and she was so excited that she's saving $17,000 on a wedding because she's going to have it at our park instead. So I thought that was an interesting note to throw in.
Oh, fantastic. She can write you a check for $17,000 now.
I'll take 10%.
You, Tracy.
Thanks, guys.
Next up is Tom Douglas.
8 clicks later. Yeah, just a brief one. The Buffalo Bayou Partnership, 2 weeks from Saturday on October the 2nd, we'll be running the Buffalo Bayou Partnership Regatta. And this is a large event that brings a lot of attention to Buffalo Bayou and the parkland along it. So if you go to the Buffalo Bayou Partnership website, you can get all the details. But it's about a 14-mile event from out west all the way down to Allen's Landing downtown. And again, that's October 2. Thanks.
Thank you. Tom sent that ahead of time, so I put that in the chat for everybody if you're interested in that.
Thanks.
Next up is Usman Mahmood. How about Wayne Kircher?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Wayne Kircher. I'm a city councilman for the city of Pattison. And if you don't know where Pattison is, it's in Waller County, a little 3.5 square mile town just west of Katy and north of Brookshire. And I've been interested in the Parks and Recreation, so I'm just here to listen, and I'm impressed by the presentations. They were excellent. I also want to mention that the City of Paterson just created a Parks Board. So they'll be very interested in knowing what's going on in the Houston-Galveston area. So anyway, thanks for having me, and a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Kircher, for coming today, and thank you for sharing what you've got going on out there in Paterson. So I think that is everybody, and we are right at 3:30. Like I said, Glenn Laird had to jump off, otherwise he would adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting normally would be a field trip in November, but I don't think that's going to happen again this year. We're not released to host big attendance events yet. So our next meeting would be in February, when we honor the award winners for the Parks and Natural Areas Awards. I will send out an email between now and then, certainly the follow-up to this meeting, as well as help us make sure that the people that we're honoring with the awards are the right people, and that the judges, that we all got it right. Because we usually do, but we like to let this roundtable take a look before we post those and send them to the NRAC. So you will hear from me a couple of times between now and our next meeting. Again, thank you everybody for coming out, and I look forward to one day, hopefully soon, seeing everybody in person again. With that, I think we're done. So thank you, everyone.